Never stop reading the Bible.
Today, we are jumping into the book of Ezekiel to break down a really intense four-part prophecy against one of the ancient world's biggest superpowers, Egypt. Now, this isn't just some prediction. It's laid out like a divine court case, putting an entire empire on trial.
And that really sets up the big question for us, doesn't it? What actually happens when a nation, at the absolute peak of its power, is brought to court? Let's get into it.
Okay, so every court case has to start with an indictment, right? And this one, found in Ezekiel chapter 29, lays out some very specific charges against Egypt and its ruler.
So there are two main accusations on the table. First, you've got the Pharaoh's incredible pride. I mean, this guy actually declared himself a god, claiming he personally created the Nile River, the very source of life for his kingdom. Then, second, Egypt became a trap for others. The people of Judah looked to Egypt for help, leaning on them for support. But the prophet calls that support a reed, something that looks sturdy but splinters the moment you put any weight on it. So the charge isn't just arrogance, it's also about being a source of false hope.
So, with the charges officially filed, the prophecy moves to the proclamation, the verdict, if you will. And to describe what's coming, the prophet uses this really specific, heavy-hitting phrase.
The phrase is, "the day of the Lord." Now, it's super important to understand this isn't talking about a literal 24-hour day. It's a prophetic term for a key moment in history, a time when God intervenes decisively to bring judgment on sin and rebellion. And for Egypt, this meant its reign as a superpower was about to come to a dramatic end.
And check this out. The prophecy gets incredibly specific about how this is all going to go down. It actually names the instrument of destruction, the rising empire of Babylon. This is amazing because it frames these huge geopolitical shifts, these wars and conquests, as part of a divine plan to hold even the mightiest nations accountable.
Okay, so to prove that this judgment is not just possible, but inevitable, the prophet points to a very recent, very powerful historical example. It's a clear and frankly chilling warning for Egypt.
To build his case, the prophet paints this incredible picture of the former superpower, Assyria, as this huge, magnificent cedar tree. God had allowed it to grow powerful and rule over other nations. But just like Pharaoh, Assyria got arrogant. It got full of itself. And for that pride, it was cut down and, metaphorically, thrown into the underworld. The message to Egypt couldn't be clearer. Look at what happened to the empire that came right before you. That's your future.
And this all leads us to the final stage of this divine trial, the sentencing. But it's not delivered like some cold, legal document. Instead, it's presented as a song of mourning, a lament for a nation that's already considered fallen.
This final judgment in chapter 32 comes in two distinct parts, and it starts right at the top. The first sentence is aimed directly at Pharaoh himself, the leader who is the very symbol of the nation's pride.
But it doesn't just stop with the king. The lament then widens its scope to include the people of Egypt. It's a powerful reminder that the consequences of a nation's sins, and especially its leadership's failures, end up affecting everyone, from the palace all the way down.
So, we've walked through the indictment, the proclamation of judgment, the historical precedent, and the final sentence. What's the bottom line here? What's the crucial point of this whole prophecy?
It really boils down to three timeless truths. First, national pride and arrogance eventually lead to a downfall. It's a pattern. Second, relying on human power, no matter how strong it seems, is useless in the end. It's a fragile foundation to build on. And finally, the prophecy makes it absolutely clear that God has ultimate authority over all nations. He raises them up and he brings them down.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to chew on. What can these ancient warnings about national pride and where we place our trust really teach us in our world today?
This has been an explainer from the Center Studio.